without further ado, welcome to Helen. And Helen, we're here to talk about this wonderful book that you've written around navigating the cybersecurity career path, which I've could tell from all my folding of the pages that every time I read, I get something out of it. But I do want to ask the very first question around what was the key motivation to writing this book, and was there something in particular, a particular moment that occurred in your career and your life that really triggered for you to make a start on it?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me, and thanks for everybody who's showed up. Lovely to see you all. So why the book? A couple of things happened on the way to me making the book. I had a job as the Chief Information Security Officer, the CISO, for the Ohio State University. And part of my role there was not just to protect the university and do all the things that CISOs do. It was also to get out in the community and talk about cybersecurity and that kind of stuff. That was part of my job. And so I started to blog, and what I found was about once a month, and I still do it, you can find my blog out there as well. About once a month, I will write something about what I'm dealing with at work. So first of all, that was happening. The second thing that happened was, because I was working at a university, probably more so than other CISOs, I had a whole bunch of students who would ask me to go for coffee and say, Helen, I want to work in security. What do I have to do to get into security? What about certifications? Do I do a degree? La, 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 la. And it was always the same questions, always the same questions. And then I would have people who had been in the industry for a while who are like, okay, I'm in security, but I'm a woman in security. How do you deal with that? Or I'm a minority, or I'm thinking about being a manager, but should I be a manager or a single? Like all of these questions. Always the same questions. And I found I didn't have enough time in the day to write all the answers all the time. And I didn't have enough tolerance for caffeine that I could meet everyone for coffee all the time and answer the same questions. So I thought, okay, how do I deal with this? And writing the book was sort of the answer. So the short answer is I wanted to be able to mentor at scale. And it seemed to me that writing a book would be a way of doing that. But having done that, the book's now, by the time I wrote it and published it, it's a couple of years old now, and we've had the pandemic and all of those things. So stay tuned. There might be a second edition coming along that, and to be honest, I think some of the things I've got in the book, most of it is still true, I think, or still true is the wrong word, still accurate. But I think my answers to some of the questions have actually changed a little bit. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess, but being in Australia, there's a lot going on with regards to our recent cybersecurity strategy that was just released last week. We're having significant changes to the Privacy Act legislation. So actually, Helen, there's some more reasons why you need to come to Melbourne next year for the ACE conference. I'm looking forward to that. Well, the rest of the questions that we're going to ask in this panel are really driven out of the book. And I think that are probably the most common pain points that we get from a lot of our members as they're entering the cybersecurity strategy industry and the field, and those that are already in there as well. So for those of you that are on the call, please put any questions that you have. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A. But I'm going to hand over to Jane for the next key question.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. Helen, in chapter 1, you titled it How to Become a Cyber Security Professional, and you share a really intriguing personal story about how you didn't really initially plan a career in cybersecurity or aim to become like a CISO, but rather found your way into the field through administrative roles, and that led you into technology implementation projects. I guess a key piece of the advice you give is pay your dues, and emphasizing the importance of understanding the relationship between technology and organizational structure. So my question to you, Helen, is could you elaborate on the significance of this understanding for someone looking to enter into the cybersecurity field? And also, how can aspiring professionals demonstrate this knowledge when seeking employment?
Right. Ooh, there's a lot in that question. Where to start? I think A couple of things. I think people have a tendency to think of cybersecurity as being primarily a technology function. Now, there is a lot to cybersecurity, right? There's a really great mind map out there. If you go and search CISO mind maps, if you Google CISO mind maps, you will come up with a mind map that a guy named Rafiq Rahman created. And it's a mind map of all the different functions in cybersecurity. And if you look at it, there are a lot of different functions in cybersecurity. But at its core, cybersecurity is about understanding the risks associated with technology. So you've got to be able to learn risk, and you've got to be able to learn tech. Now, you can't learn all tech. There's too much tech to be good at all the tech, but you've got to know some tech, right? And so when I talk about paying dues, I think what prompted that was when I would have coffee with students who wanted to get into cybersecurity, my first question to them is, why do you want to work in security? Why security? And more often than not, their first answer is, I want to hack. I want to hack. Perfectly fine answer, except that you don't start by hacking, because you've got to learn what the technology can do, what's normal tech, so that you can identify what's abnormal tech. And you've got to be able to understand risk, because while some things are abnormal, it doesn't make them risky. And while some things are abnormal, it doesn't matter to some companies that it's abnormal. So you've got to understand sort of this 360-degree view of tech and risk and how companies think about it. And that takes time. So one of the things I was really sort of blessed to get was a guy who ran his own company. He needed resources. This was in the 90s, where there were plenty of people who didn't understand technology, and he was willing to train me on the job. But really, I spent almost 10 years learning on the job. It wasn't a 6-month internship and then I knew what I was doing. It came over time. And so I think that's what I was trying to get at, both with my story and those comments around learning on the job and paying your dues. You've got to be a little bit humble. You've got to be humble all the time, but you've got to particularly be humble in the beginning and recognize that it's going to take a little time to pull all that together. Having said that, there are a lot of people who are already in a career who've decided they want to move into technology, and who has time to go back to the beginning again and start from scratch, right? And so I think that thought around paying your dues can also be paying your dues while you're in the role you're in, which isn't a security role, learning about security before you move into security. So you can laterally move over as opposed to having to go back to the beginning again. So what that concept of paying your dues is going to depend on where you're starting from a little bit too.
Yeah, fabulous. I love those responses. Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, I think someone's on mute.
Thank you. I've got the next question, Helen. Thanks for the prompt. Yeah, so you talk about understanding your why and where to start, and that it's more than just the immediate tasks, it's the underlying motivations and the values that drive your efforts.
Yeah.
Could you share with us insights into how a strong sense of purpose has influenced your career in cybersecurity?
Yeah.
How, others may be able to identify with their why?
Yeah, for sure. When I talk about this, both in the book and also when I speak at conferences and things like that, I think this is the most important question that I think people getting into cybersecurity need to be able to answer, because what your why is will determine a couple of things: what kind of security you want to do, and it will also determine how resilient you are in terms of being able to stay in the career and thrive in the career, right? For me, my desire to do cybersecurity, I accidentally got into cybersecurity. And if you read the first chapter of the book, you'll know the story. But I started in IT, and I'm the kind of person that I like to be able to predict my day. So I want to be able to have a plan. I'm a checklist kind of girl. I get up in the morning. I know what I'm going to be planning to do for the day. On Fridays, I wrap up my week and I review it. And on Sunday nights, I look at my week ahead and I plan for it. What I found was in the 90s, this was when viruses and worms started happening, right? And my plans were shot. Like I would go in thinking I was going to be doing one thing, and I would find that all my plans went out the window. And so for me, my why around security is about helping people not have unpleasant surprises, right? So I sum that up by saying my why is vanilla ice cream. I want to know what I'm getting. I want it to be predictable. I want everybody else to know what it means. That's why I do security, right? Now, over time, that's sort of mellowed a little bit or merged a little bit. What I found, for example, is while that's true for everybody, I find that organizations that are government organizations are the ones that primarily do critical infrastructure, right? So when you think water, power, food, or, all of public health, all of those things tend to happen in government agencies, and they are the least resourced and most stressed parts of our ecosystem. So I now have this why that says I want to help the people who need the most help. And in cybersecurity, that's the public sector. So I am now in a role where I'm working in the public sector, right? So understanding your why will sort of give you guidance as to what you want to do. If you're the kind of person that really likes playing with tech, like you geek out on tech, you like pulling things apart, you like coding just because it makes fun things happen on your screen, you're probably not going to get into GRC, in that, like governance, risk, and compliance. You're probably going to get into DevSecOps. You might become a red teamer. You might be a hacker, dare I say it, right? The software path is going to be different than the hardware path, right? If you're the kind of person that likes rules and regulations, and by the way, I am also one of those, or policy, then it might tend to take you down the path of GRC, right? You might decide that you're really into the ethics of tech. And so you might get into more policy around cybersecurity kinds of things. And you might be knee deep right now in thinking about the ethics of artificial intelligence and the security of artificial intelligence, right? So all of these things, understanding your why is going to help you narrow down what the potential options are for your career path, and then be able to go when things get tough, because they will get tough. It's not all tough, but sometimes it can get a bit rough. You can go, why am I here? Oh, I know why I'm here. Because I want to make people's day better, or I want to protect critical infrastructure, or I want to geek out on stuff. And this is a career where I can geek out. And it can help you be resilient as you go through your career path. So that's why I really hone in on that why question.
I really like that response, Helen. I think it also helps with, staying in cybersecurity, and reconnecting with your why.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That's great. I think Lobna, you've got the next question.
Yeah, thank you. So in chapter 13, you speak about single contributor and leadership. In cybersecurity field, professionals often face the decision with whether to advance to leadership or to deepen in their expertise and individual contributor. Based on your extensive experience, what advice would you offer? Dabbling with this decision, like how would you evaluate your personal strengths, aspiration, and the needs for the industry, and the best choice for their career path?
Yeah. I have a lot of people that are in security, and they'll come to me and they'll say, I've been a single contributor, I've been a software engineer or a security engineer or an analyst or whatever, and I want to advance my career. Should I be a manager? Is that the path for me to follow? Or should I take a single contributor role, like maybe a security architect or something like that, and continue to be a technically focused person without direct reports, but to be able to influence broadly through my own individual technology skills, right? The reality in most organizations that are big enough to even support you in that journey is that often the only way to advance in terms of rank or money is, it on paper anyway, looks like becoming a manager of a team, right? And if you like managing people, then that's sort of no problem, right? Go ahead, do it. Sounds like a good thing. But what a lot of people also forget is that people tend to get offered management jobs because they're really great at tech or really great at security, not because they're really great people managers. And it is a completely different skill set. So the thing I talk about when people come to me and say, what should I do? Is that the first thing I do is I say, what do you think a manager's role looks like in your company? Because it always is a little bit different. At Cisco, there's a whole bunch of emphasis put on being a good coach and mentor and manager of people. And there's a lot of training that goes along with it. There's also a lot of administrative work that goes along with it, right? And some people really love that. And some people really don't love that. They're like, do not make me sit in a one-on-one with my staff because I'd much rather be coding or configuring a firewall or doing whatever it is that they do, right? So the first thing I would say to people is go learn what it's like to be a manager, at least in your organization. There's going to be a lot of carryover to other organizations as well. If that looks good to you, then absolutely pursue it. But if you look at it and you go, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself before I even get to work in the morning because this kind of stuff makes me poke my eyeballs out, you're not going to be a manager. And not only does that mean bad things for your career, but for all the people you manage, it's going to suck for them too, right? So the thing about management is how good or bad you are really impacts the entire team. It's a responsibility to be sure that that's what you want to do. So if you're in a company where the only way up is through a management chain and you don't want to do management, then you have a choice. You can either go to your company and say, I don't want to be a manager, but I want an increased scope because my skills are growing and you should pay me for that. And you should reward me from a rank perspective for that. How do we do that? So it becomes a negotiation. Or you think about going to a different company, right? So there's some different ways of thinking about that. But a lot of people just assume that at some point in their career, they have to be a manager. I've had employees who are wonderful security people, really care about other people, who got into management and went, this is really hard for me because I am so worried about my staff that I'm actually micromanaging, I'm not doing my own work, and I'm not being effective as a manager because I care too much. And they decided ultimately that their best path was to be a single contributor. So it's not just about that you suck as a manager or you don't care about people, you're not going to be a good manager. It's also, can you balance that relationship between yourself and other people properly so that you can advance the team while also taking care of yourself? And some people can't manage those boundaries very well. So long answer to your question. I think there's sort of two pivot points in people's careers that can really be a big jump and hard to adjust to. One is when you become a manager of people, and then one is when you become a manager of managers. That's a whole different level of sort of thinking and way of working again. So my dog just started barking. Apologies for that. So it's not a decision to take lightly. So do your homework if you want to be a manager, for sure. It's important. Yeah.
Great. We've got someone who's actually put their hand up. Morgan, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, and continue to this managing. I want to ask, the most companies these days, they don't make you manager without any technical knowledge. Basically, they're focusing on tech manager. Mm-hmm. So how do we have to approach to our supervisor or managers to teach us to be a good manager? Because it sounds might be to take their space or to take their work at the moment they're doing. And yeah, basically, how can we be a manager and also show our technical skills at the same time?
Yeah, it's certainly in cybersecurity, you're not going to be a manager unless you've got some technical expertise. And tech can look different in different roles, right? So if you're a GRC manager, it might be that you really understand the compliance landscape, and that is the technical of your role. It could be if you're a SOC analyst, you really understand you know, the tech stack and how to monitor the environment, those kinds of things, and that's your technical role. The reality is when if you decide to take a manager role of people, it's one of the hardest roles, actually, because often in those kinds of roles, not only are you managing people, but you also have to be technical and have your own technical responsibilities all at the same time. You don't just go from being a technical person doing tech stuff to being a manager and only managing. It's usually a blend of the two things. So the first thing is you are going to need to, this goes back to sort of paying your dues a little bit better, in that you're going to have to put in the time to really understand the technical space. Whatever your role is, you've got to get good at it before you can think about being a manager of other folks. But assuming that you've got those tech skills, then the question is, how do you get the management experience so that you can be a management candidate? In that situation, what you need to do is to, even if you're not administratively and on paper managing people, you need to find opportunities to manage people, even if they don't report directly to you. That can be leading a team, that can be running an initiative, that could be putting up your hand and saying, hey, I'm thinking that there's this improvement we can make in our team. I'd like to work with some of the other team members to make that happen, and seeing what you can do to direct them to do the work to make the improvement that you're thinking of. It can also be working with other team members outside the security team to achieve a security goal, right? So you can learn on the job some management skills, and there are also classes you can take. If your own company doesn't offer you management training classes, there's plenty of stuff out there that's both free or paid around how to be a manager, and plenty of books and podcasts and audio books and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot you can self-learn around being a manager as well. But in security, you're going to be a technical manager. So you need to carry both.
Yep, thank you. I got my answer.
Thank you. There's actually some question in the chat. I might just refer to that, Helen. So we do have a participant who's asking about if there's any internship programs, she did say available in Australia, or what certifications would help an IT support technician like me who is looking forward for a career change into cybersecurity. How would a support person like me with no experience in cybersecurity land an entry-level job in cybersecurity?
Yeah. So the good news is, actually, if you're on an IT help desk or in an IT service role, you're halfway there, because we see a lot of people trying to get into cybersecurity who've never worked in a technology role before. So the fact that you're coming from a tech place is a really great place to start. The question is, how do you get the cybersecurity experience? From a certification perspective, there are some general certifications that you can take that are going to help you understand the language, the concepts, those kinds of things. They don't train you to be a cybersecurity person, but they introduce you to all the things that you're going to need to think about and know. So the CompTIA certification, the Security Essentials certification. There's a number I put in the book. I'm happy if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to give you 2 or 3 links to that. I did a post on LinkedIn this week, and a blog about what are the certifications that are out there and some of the challenges, blah, blah. Anyway, if you get a general certification, that's a really great place to start. But I would still go back to you and say, regardless of where you are now, why do you want to get into security, and what kind of role are you thinking of? Are you thinking of going from an IT help desk to a SOC analyst role? Are you wanting to do IT help desk to being an identity management person? Like, depending the kind of security you want to do, there might be a certification that focuses on that piece. So if you're not sure, get a general certification. But if you're sure you want to be a SOC analyst or an identity person or a GRC person, then go get a certification specifically in those areas. The challenge becomes with the certs is that often those specialized certifications, it's not only learning the material and taking a test, there is also an assumption of on-the-job experience in those areas. What I recommend for people in that case is that you read the materials, you learn the materials, or take a class or a boot camp or LinkedIn Learning or whatever. Sit the exam if you can and pass it if you can. On your resume, you put that you're pursuing that certification, because you are, right? But you can't actually get the cert until you've been doing the job for a couple of years, right? So at least if you can say you're pursuing the certification, you passed the test, you've done the classwork, whatever, it's going to sometimes get you past some of the resume filters that would otherwise filter you out. But it also indicates to the hiring managers that you're interested in that particular kind of thing. So that's how I would make that move. The other thing I'd say is, if you're working for an IT help desk, if your organization has a security team, go talk to them directly, because the fastest path for you to get into security is in the company you're in often. So if you've got a security team, go tell them you want to learn, and they might find things for you to do even while you're working on the help desk that can give you the on-the-job experience in your company, and that will put you to the top of the list in terms of candidates when you're ready to pull the trigger on it.
That's excellent. I think that's such great advice that you've just provided us, Helen. Thank you. It's probably leading into another question Carmen has, which was specifically around entering into the GRC field, and if you need a degree for that. I think you kind of touched on it, but if you wanted to maybe...
Yeah, it's sort of funny. How do I talk about that? So GRC is in itself a really big discipline, right? So there's the governance side, there's the risk side, there's the compliance side, and the bigger the company you go into, the more complicated and specialized each of those things become, right? So GRC is no different than any other part of cybersecurity in terms of whether or not a degree is needed. Now, here's the challenge. When you look at job postings for GRC or other parts of cybersecurity, at least half of them are going to ask for a bachelor's degree. I will tell you that at least half of them shouldn't ask for a bachelor's degree. And I am on a personal mission to get hiring managers, if they can, to stop asking for degrees. They're using the degree as a proxy for skill. And the problem is, most cybersecurity degrees don't give you skill in GRC, and there aren't GRC degrees out there, right? So I would suggest to you that having a general degree, I'm not going to say having a degree isn't going to help you at all, but it can be a degree in any kind of field, doesn't really matter. But I would go and suggest to you that maybe doing a certification that's focused on GRC, privacy, certainly in Australia at the moment, is going to be a big one. Any kind of risk management. The ISACA, ISACA.org, is an international organization that has certifications that are more leaning towards auditors and risk management. So that might be a place for you to go and look at a couple of certifications that are GRC-focused certifications. But you're going to have to sort of go where the market leads you. If you look at a job description for a job that you think you really want, they're asking for a degree, it might suggest to you that you're going to need a degree, but you can't get a degree in GRC. So go get a degree in something you enjoy, and then get a certification in GRC and go from there. But I would also apply for the job, even if you don't have the degree. Even if they ask for the degree, apply for the job anyway and see where you go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Helen. While we're on me moderating the Q&As, there's another question here from Karen. She says the book is full of resources. She loves it. How do you discover the items that you discuss in the book? When do you make time to research and read?
I've made it a habit. So there's a couple of things I would say to everybody who's on the call. If you, regardless of the job you're in now, or if you don't have a job, find a way to make it a habit to spend 2 or 3 hours a week researching. If you want to get into cybersecurity, it changes so fast that you can't just stick your head down and do the same job every day, because it will pass you by if you do it. So you've got to make it a work habit to be able to go out and look at stuff. So I have a tendency, and this is just the way I work, and it's not going to work for everybody. I have lots of meetings, sort of back-to-back meetings, and then I have a break, and then I have meetings and I have a break, and that's sort of my work day. When I have a break, I'm online. I'm looking and seeing what's being posted on LinkedIn, and I'm following people who make good recommendations in terms of looking at resources. I sign up for newsletters that I read in the morning over breakfast, because that's how I sort of process my information, right? So there's a lot of really great security authors who are on Substack. I know plenty of people who read Reddit, cybersecurity Reddit threads at lunch or at breakfast, right? While I'm walking my dog, I listen to podcasts about cybersecurity. Now, I know that makes me sound like a complete nerd. I do have a life outside of cybersecurity, but I try and, as much as I can, I try and fit it into my work week, because when I'm doing that kind of work, and when you do that kind of work, you're benefiting your company. So do it on their hours if you can do it, right? But if there's something that's outside your immediate scope of the job you've done now, you might need to carve time aside for it on the weekends or the mornings or the evenings, to be able to get at least enough knowledge about the subject that you know where to go to get the answers. One of the hardest parts about working in security is getting the answers to the questions you need. And I'm sorry, but ChatGPT is not going to solve for that, right? So you've got to be able to know where to go to get it is a skill of a cybersecurity person to be able to know where to get resources and to curate your feeds so that you're getting the information you need and not the information you don't, because it's really easy to get overwhelmed by how much information is in the industry right now. So I hope that helps.
Yes, no, lots of great information. I'm like absorbing all the great content that you're giving us. Thank you, Helen. I'm just looking at some other questions. While I'm looking, if anyone wants to ask something, please.
Yeah, I might actually just come in there, Helen. I mean, what you've actually been referring today was very, very important from the perspective of, a hiring manager. And, when you have lots of applications, and you probably see this coming in to hire roles, for me in particular, I'm always looking for those with the growth mindset, which you're just a role model with what you've actually described. But that's to the level that we're sort of expecting these days, to be kept up to date with everything that's going on. I was going to actually just want to ask a question more around the earlier on, at the very beginning, you mentioned that it was really important to understand, the technology, the wider landscape of things within the business. I think that's also really important from the perspective of being able to talk about the return on investment with regards to big, privacy or cyber programs. And that's always a challenge to say, well, these are the risks. This is what could happen. Oh, it's not going to happen to us. We're going to be okay. Keen to get your view around that scenario and how you've actually been able to succeed in getting the support that you needed from the executives and the organization.
Yeah, it's a funny question, isn't it? I don't know if I was to rate myself in terms of how successful I've been. I don't know that I'd give myself an A, and I think it would probably be more like a C+ or a B, to be honest. I think that how to answer that question. First of all, you don't have to convince everybody. But when you're trying to run a security program or trying to get money to buy a security tool or whatever, there are some key people in an organization that you need to be able to convince. So the first thing is, when you walk into a new job, doesn't matter what level, an entry-level cybersecurity person or a CISO, you're going to have to work out who are the stakeholders in your role that are going to make your role successful or make your life miserable. And I will tell you, I've had, network partners who've made my life miserable. And I've had engineering partners who are like, don't tell me to patch my stuff because I got other stuff going on and blah, blah, blah. I can't convince everybody. But for the people that I think I need to be able to have a good partnership with, one, I've got to invest in the partnership. So take them to lunch, get them a coffee, whatever. It doesn't always have to be food related, but that's just my go-to. Because sometimes you're going to give them good news and that's great, but sometimes you're going to give them bad news. And if you haven't built the relationship up ahead of time, the bad news is going to hurt a lot more than if you had taken the time to build into the relationship first. So number one, build your relationships with your stakeholders. Number two is you've got to be able to make what you're trying to do meaningful through their eyes. So most people don't care about cybersecurity and security. And if you go to them and say, I need to do this thing because security, they're going to say, I don't care. But if you go to them and say, I need to do this thing because it makes what you want to do happen, and if you don't do this thing that I need for security, your thing won't happen, then they're going to care. I'll give you an example. When I was the CISO at Ohio State's a research university. So we had students and faculty doing teaching, but we also had a lot of research people. And when you do security at a university, and I don't know if anybody here does security for an education thing, it's painful. Like when I was doing security for a Wall Street bank and you said to people, everything's confidential, they got it because everything's confidential in a bank, right? You go to a university and you say everything's confidential and they go, no, my job is to share information with the world. I want everything out there. Everything's public. And you're like, oh, like, kill me now. What have I done? But researchers, they want to share their information with the world, but they don't want anyone messing with their data, because if you mess with their data, all their research is invalidated. So they didn't care about confidentiality. They cared about data integrity, right? So if I go to them and say, I need you to have multi-factor authentication, I need you to have MFA, because people can get into your data and mess with it. And they were like, oh. Now, if I'd have gone to them and said, you need MFA because security, they would have gone, yeah, go away, Helen. Don't care, right? So you've got to find what they care about and talk to them in those kinds of terms. So, yeah. That's how to get it.
What's in it for them, and what do they really care about? Helen, I've given up on the coffees. I'm on the scotches now. I'm starting to offer. Can I take you out for a scotch? Just the stage I've got to. I know there's a hand over to Jane. There is a very long question, but an important one in the chat. Over to you, Jane.
Yeah, so is that the one from Anna? So in summary, she's been in technology for 20 years delivering. She actually got made redundant as well in the process, but she's actually been trying to apply for roles in LinkedIn and Seek, but no calls. And she's reached out to a few networks, but no responses. Like, do you have any advice for her?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. The question is, are you not getting called in for interviews, or are you getting called in for interviews and not making the cut in terms of being offered a job?
Hi, Helen. I've got a cold, I'm sorry. So I'll just explain. So specifically in cybersecurity, I got pulled into doing digital transformation in the areas of InfoSec and IAM.
Yep.
And so that's been the last 3 years. So I am applying, I'm not getting calls. And the networks that I've been talking to, like the Ping Identity, they're like, oh, we've just merged with ForgeRock, so wait till next year. So that's fair. I'll wait till next year. But I mean, I'm saying I've got experience and I'm saying I've got 3 years. What else could I do?
Yeah, so you're right. Some of it could be timing, and some of it can also be the kinds of organizations you're applying for. So if you and I had a one-on-one, I'm happy to do that, by the way, if you want to schedule some time with me. One of the questions I'd ask is, are you limiting where you're sending your resume out to? And maybe you are, and maybe you're doing that on purpose, and that's appropriate for what you're looking for. But I would say, especially right now, the market is a bit sluggish, actually. And it's the end of year. So there's a lot of companies who are going to defer their hiring until January or February because of the time of the year. So that could be a part of it. The other thing is, especially in the identity and access management space, you may already know this, but identity is one of those things that isn't always in cybersecurity, even though it's very important to cybersecurity. So in some companies, it's a security role. In some companies, it's an IT infrastructure role. In some companies, it's a business operations role, not even in the IT field. So the other thing to think about when you're sending your resume in and you're and hopefully you're doing a cover letter as well. I know that's very old-fashioned, but it makes a difference still. You've got to know, if you can, where in the organization the identity role sits, because if you make it a super security heavy resume and it's not a security team that identity sits in, you're going to lose them. On the other hand, if it is in a security team, but your resume doesn't talk about it in terms of security, it talks about it in terms of identity process, you're going to lose them. So understanding organizationally where identity sits when you're making the application is important.
So particularly I'm actually applying to any roles that are open and seek and has got that identity, IAM or the InfoSec.
Yep.
But you're right, though. I mean, like, for example, Macquarie Group, how would I find out where does identity sit, whether it sits in the, data space, because they're trying to secure the sharing of data, because my background is open banking too. So I don't know. I'm just, and you might be right, because the market is there any particular podcast that you could recommend or any particular certification you could recommend for my level, the program management?
So I think actually I'm just going to say your book is full of resources to be able to support the answers to those questions. So, and I recommend you reach out and get the book for that. And we're just sort of heading towards the end of the session.
Okay.
And I wanted to thank you so much, Anna, for those really important questions. I wanted this is the last question that we've got on our list.
Okay, sorry, Helen, is it okay if I reach out to you private message?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate.
Okay, great. Helen, I wanted just to reference, there's a really important quote in your book that I really resonated with, in particular, being part of, women in cybersecurity. And the quote is, "The security profession has a problem. It's both an image and a systemic functional problem." Could you talk about your experience with regards to, navigating those complex issues, and what advice do you give it to our community to be able to help create the inclusivity and also resolve these challenges?
Yeah. So where that quote came from, for people who can't put that in context because they haven't read the book, is really around diversity in security and diversity in tech in general, but diversity in security in particular. We have a lot of people, when you show up at conferences, when you go to online events, it's typically not diverse. It's not diverse in terms of gender or race or neurodiversity or sexuality or any of those things, right? So we have that problem. Now, some of that problem is cultural, and it's sort of broader than the cybersecurity profession. It's systemic within the culture as well. But functionally within security, we've still got some underlying issues as well. Often, even when we talk about the statistics that you heard on the video in terms of 20% of cybersecurity being female, for example, those numbers hide the fact that there are certain functions in cybersecurity that have even less female participation or higher participation. So GRC tends to have a higher percentage of women in it than security engineering. And in the security engineering function, architecture has fewer women in it than any other security function, actually. The challenge is architecture is often a role that you need to have under your belt before you can become a CISO. So if we're wondering why females aren't showing up in the CISO role, it's because they're not coming through the functional areas that are predominantly managed and sort of participated in by men. So we have some systemic functional issues going on internally in cybersecurity that we need to address ourselves. And we've got this overall image problem. So, part of the benefit of WiCyS and other groups is we're trying to get diversity into some of these areas that don't have diversity already. And it's going to take us some time, unfortunately.
Yeah, and perhaps maybe that could be a great topic to due to talk about when you hopefully come to Melbourne at the ASA conference next year. All right, well, we're just about to finish up, and there is a few things, I guess, that we wanted to bring up in the session today. I put the link into Helen's fantastic website, which is actually CISOHelen.com. Love the URL there. And it's got a lot of information around the blogs and how to actually buy the book as well. I did want to also mention a couple of things with regards to WiCyS and our membership. We are a non-profit organisation headquartered in the United States. We have an amazing membership offer that includes membership for full-time students and those that are in the academia space as well. And from a value perspective, it's probably the best that I've actually really encountered against all the other professional associations. The key one is really that we're very grateful and fortunate for ASA, who provide us with free tickets for our members to attend the 3-day conference. And generally that costs about $800. So that's one little reason to join a community, apart from the fact that your networking opportunities grow. And a lot of it's about networking, but also, as we saw at the very beginning, WiCyS have extraordinary partners. That includes Cisco, includes Google's, all the large organizations who provide fantastic training opportunities as part of your membership. So the link, Jan will put the link into the membership page in the chat. With regards to next year for WiCyS, as mentioned, the ASA conference is our big event, but we will be running sessions right throughout the year and webinars with guest speakers. But the most important one, I'm hoping, Helen, that next November when the ASA conference is on, that you're here in Melbourne with us, and we're able to really have some fun and have some great conversations. Helen, I'll hand over to you just for the last words to finish off the session.
Yeah. So first of all, again, thank you very much for having me. Hopefully I can make it out to Australia, especially this time of year. Ohio is really cold, so I'd love to be able to make it back to Oz. For everyone who's here, if you're in security already, keep going. We need you. And congratulations for engaging with WiCyS. One of the things that I really emphasize a lot is networking is a super important skill for all of us to have. And networks are not only a place for you to advance your career, but to also get support. So for those of you who are in security, you will need support. Well done, you're here. For those of you who are trying to get into security, keep trying. It can be hard to get into a security role, but once you're in, it's usually not that hard to stay in and advance and have a really wonderful career. So congratulations on wanting to even pursue it. I look forward to seeing you all hopefully soon.
Oh, fantastic, Helen. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's such a privilege, and we're so proud, WiCyS Australia affiliate, to have you as one of our great CISOs. And I notice you say CISO, so we say CISO. But anyway, thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you all next year. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.